Hi guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I'd like to talk today about refined carbohydrates and when they can be incorporated into a healthy, high quality diet. Now, if you have visited my website or watched any of my previous videos, you will see that I advocate avoiding all refined carbohydrates, particularly refined crystalline sugars such as fructose and sucrose. And consume only whole grain sources of carbohydrates. The reason for this is that the refined carbohydrates that are consumed as part of the Western diet are now thought to be a major contributory factor in the development of obesity and also in cardiovascular disease. However, there are times when refined carbohydrates can be beneficial, and I'd like to talk today about when you can incorporate those types of foods into your diet. Now, one of the things I recommend for weight loss, for losing body fat, is high intensity exercise such as weight training. And this causes a depletion of glycogen in your body. Glycogen is the storage form of carbohydrate you have in your muscles, and also you have some in your liver. When you perform high intensity activity, this glycogen is broken down, it's used as energy, and the glycogen stores in your skeletal muscle and your liver need to be replenished before you can perform more physical activity at that intensity. You have a window after you've performed high intensity activity where ingestion of carbohydrates results in the synthesis of glycogen. This window is a good opportunity to take in some of the foods that maybe you shouldn't normally eat as part of your diet. And the reason for this is that when you have performed this type of activity, there is a need by your skeletal muscles and your liver to resynthesize this glycogen very quickly. And at this time, it becomes advantageous to take the sorts of carbohydrates that normally you would avoid. Now the passing of the glucose into the blood at a very rapid rate is actually advantageous. Your skeletal muscles and your liver become like a sponge for the glucose that you absorb, and they resynthesize the glycogen, and this helps with the recovery so that you can perform activity at the same intensity more sooner than you would be able to if you didn't consume these types of foods. Now, the window after high intensity activity is actually quite large. There's probably a window of a couple of hours where ingestion of refined carbohydrates will probably have no effect detrimental effect on your body composition. In fact, it will benefit you because those carbohydrates will be turned into skeletal muscle glycogen and liver glycogen. But the window is actually longer than that. It's just that as the time period from the activity passes, the amount of this carbohydrate that will be turned into glycogen diminishes. So as soon as you have finished your activity, you can consume simple sugars, you can consume refined carbohydrates. And if you are on a fat loss plan, these foods at this time will not detrimentally affect your program. You will continue to lose body fat. And in fact, they are advantageous. They will actually boost your skeletal muscle glycogen stores. They will boost your liver glycogen stores. They'll pull water into the muscles, and they'll actually increase the protein synthesis rates and help you build muscle. And this means that you can have a cheat meal. If you have a particular craving for types of refined carbohydrates, as long as you time them into that 2-hour window after you've done high intensity activity, they will not have a detrimental effect on your physiological activity. So incorporating your cheat foods into this type of program is a good idea because psychologically it allows you to eat some of the foods that maybe you wouldn't normally eat. The types of foods you can eat, you can eat refined rice, you can eat refined pasta, you could eat refined bread, you could even drink sugary drinks, you could make your own drinks. The things to actually avoid at this time are foods with lots of fiber in them. You want the glucose, you want the sugars to be passed into your bloodstream quickly, you want the glycogen to be resynthesized quickly, and therefore you want to avoid all the foods I normally advocate eating. Vegetables, fruits, whole fruits. You want to avoid whole grain products, and you actually want to consume those things you wouldn't normally eat. And there is one other thing that you must consume when you consume these refined carbohydrates, and that is a good source of protein. I would recommend in this 2-hour window that you consume most of your daily protein intake. Whether this comes from supplemental whey protein, which is what I would suggest that you do look into, or it comes from whole foods, which would be slightly less advantageous, you need to consume lots of protein in this time, because this is the time when you have a lot of skeletal muscle breakdown. The amino acids in the protein also help release insulin, which helps drive some of the carbohydrate into the skeletal muscle, which helps build skeletal muscle. So it's important that when you consume these refined carbohydrates, you consume them with a good source of protein. I would suggest a good quality whey protein. And within this 2-hour window, you can eat a lot of the foods you wouldn't normally eat, and therefore I would recommend that psychologically you use this as a time to let go of some of those healthier foods and eat some of the foods you wouldn't normally eat. Now, the foods to avoid that are processed are anything with trans fatty acids in them. Things like cakes and biscuits, although they have simple sugars in them, they are detrimental to the health because they contain metabolic poisons such as trans fatty acids. Those trans fatty acids interfere with your metabolic pathways that metabolize essential fatty acids, and they will have long-term consequences on your health. So you should not at this time consume refined products that contain trans fatty acids. That is the one caveat in this little discussion. As long as you avoid trans fatty acids, things with sugar in them, refined carbohydrates are fine, but make sure you time them into that 2-hour window after you've performed your high intensity activity.